I lowered my head in embarrassment. Perhaps my current disheveled state was too much for Jack, the playboy known for his fondness for charming women, to bear.
What's wrong with you, Michael? Where's your gentlemanly conduct?
He pushed away the young model in his arms, walked over, and picked up the check from the ground, flicking off the dust before handing it to me.
Here, take it.
I stared at the thin piece of paper without moving.
What I want isn't this.
Jack frowned, his dark pupils reflecting my current sorry state. A mocking laugh fell heavily from above, making me feel even more humiliated. Michael, who was looking down on me, always believed that a girl like me was only with him for his money.
I'll cover the compensation. We're even now. Don't bother me again.
With that, he left without looking back, holding his beloved Sarah. Before leaving, he didn't forget to warn his good friend.
Jack, don't meddle in other people's business.
Jack raised an eyebrow and responded with a disdainful snort.
Mind your own business, Michael.
I watched their backs, my throat dry, as if a knife was stuck in it, unable to make any sound. I couldn't blame anyone else for this, it was all my own doing. Why did I like him so much? I liked him so much that I shamelessly pursued him for 2 years despite everyone's ridicule and finally stood by his side. But before a year had passed, his beloved Sarah returned from abroad, and he immediately kicked me out. Standing on the busy street, my mind was filled with Michael's gaze from earlier. The contempt and disgust in his eyes made me feel so uncomfortable that I wanted to throw up. Even though it was summer, I felt cold all over, so cold that I could hardly breathe. I felt humiliated. Even on the way back, that suffocating feeling made it hard for me to breathe. After breaking up with Michael, I rented a place far from here to avoid being a nuisance. My high heels were rubbing against my heels, almost drawing blood. Standing under the sun, I felt dizzy. After a moment, I took off the painful high heels and held them in my hand. Just as I was about to walk back barefoot, a black Audi smoothly pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing a familiar face as Jack, the second son of the Joe family. He and Michael were close, but I rarely saw him because Michael didn't like taking me out. He had a cigarette in his mouth, his charming eyes filled with affection, making it hard to look directly at him when he smiled.
Smoking while driving can be dangerous.
He raised an eyebrow slightly, a smile touching the corners of his eyes.
You were right.
He put out the cigarette and nodded at me, looking every bit the carefree playboy.
Get in the car, I'll give you a ride.
People like him always spoke in the same commanding tone, regardless of whether the other person was willing or not. I straightened up, feeling the texture of the ground beneath my bare feet. I looked at the crowd in the distance but didn't move.
Michael doesn't like me interacting with his friends.
Haven't you two broken up?
I hesitated, taking a deep breath.
He wouldn't like you and me being in the same car.
A scoff came from inside the car. Jack's expression was dismissive, his demeanor indifferent as if nothing mattered to him. He laughed lightly.
Do you think I care about that?
Of course, Jack was known as a notorious playboy in our circle, handsome, wealthy, and influential, with countless women in his arms. He never cared about public opinion, let alone Michael's. I hesitated for a couple of seconds before getting into the car. The cool air inside the car eased my tension. He rested his head on one hand, staring blankly at the steering wheel.
What's wrong?
He lazily withdrew his hand, his eyes holding a hint of a smile.
It's a pity such pretty feet got hurt.
I realized he had been looking at my feet.
High heels can be painful. You'd look great in flats too.
I fastened my seatbelt and thanked him.
Thank you for giving me a lift. It's a bit far to my place. If it's too much trouble, you can drop me off at the next intersection where it's easier to get a cab.
His gaze shifted to the windshield, his fingers tapping the steering wheel absent-mindedly. His tone was flat, revealing no emotion.
Are you always this, polite to people? Or should I say, do you always keep people at a distance?
I was taken aback.
Sorry, I just don't like troubling others.
He turned to look at me, his dark eyes unreadable.
Because I'm Michael's friend?
The mention of Michael felt like a sudden stab, catching me off guard. I lowered my eyes and shook my head gently.
If I really minded that you're Michael's friend, I wouldn't have gotten in the car in the first place.
That's just how I am. I don't like others intruding too much into my life. I find that a small world can be quite pleasant and free.
Do you act the same way when Michael drives you home?
That question felt unnecessary. I maintained a smile.
He never drives me home. He doesn't really like me.
As the more humble party in our relationship, I was always aware of my place and never demanded such things from him. Jack's gaze grew more surprised, and I even caught a hint of anger. Anger? Before I could process it, Jack's voice broke the silence.
Emily, you're really pitiful.
Yes, I was pitiful, knowing full well that Michael would never fall for me, yet still offering myself up to him. But people are fickle creatures, driven by emotions that other beings don't possess, and I was just an ordinary one among them. I could like Michael, but that didn't mean he had to like me back. In this relationship, I was just temporarily trapped, but I would eventually move on. There was a moment of silence in the car, which Jack finally broke.
A gentleman wouldn't let a lady hitch a ride halfway, Alice. You're overthinking it.
He affectionately called me Alice, bringing the conversation back to the beginning. He started the car, humming along to the music, reverting to his usual carefree self, as if nothing had happened, as if that brief moment of vulnerability hadn't been him at all. I didn't let him drop me off right at my building. About 200 or 300 meters away, I asked him to let me out. Through the window, he was still looking at my feet.
Does it hurt?
It's fine. Thank you for your concern.
His gaze was meaningful.
Shoes, they need to fit well, that's the most important thing.
His words had a deeper meaning, likely warning me not to cling to his good friend. I understood he was referring to Michael and me. I didn't know how to respond, but I didn't like pretending to be ignorant, so I decided to be honest.
Don't worry, Jack. I'm not the type to cling. I understand the concept of a clean break. After all,
I thought of the check that had been thrown at me and smiled bitterly.
once you've been paid off, it would be shameless to keep clinging.
Jack's face was expressionless, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. He stepped on the gas and quickly disappeared from my sight. I threw my high heels aside, my toes still aching. For a long time, I didn't touch those shoes again. Every time I saw them, I would think of everything Michael had done and that scorching heat from that day. A month later, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my phone ringing incessantly on the bedside table. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a couple of seconds before answering, and the noise on the other end was chaotic.
Sis-in-law, Michael's had too much to drink. Can you come pick him up?
Michael? There was a moment of confusion, then a slurred, heavily intoxicated voice broke through.
Come get me, I'm Ed.
You should be calling your girlfriend, not me.
The breathing on the other end was heavy and clear. The noisy background gradually quieted down, as if people had noticed his displeasure. All I could hear was his breathing. Michael was silent for so long that I thought he might have passed out, but then a cold laugh came through.
Emily?
Yes, it's me.
Whether it was because of the sudden phone call or the unusually bright moonlight outside, Emily tossed and turned in bed, unable to find any sleep. The air conditioner hummed loudly in the room. She sat up and stared at the moonlight on the floor for a while before finally putting on her slippers and stepping outside. She hadn't expected Michael to call her tonight, nor had she expected to run into Jack at this hour. When she saw him, he was leaning against a lamppost, smoking. The red glow of the cigarette flared and dimmed with his movements. She turned to leave, but as soon as she did, she heard Jack's voice behind her.
Emily.
She turned back to look at him, seeing the teasing expression on his face.
Running away as soon as you see me? Why?
He walked over slowly, moving from the yellow glow of the streetlight into the silver moonlight.
I wasn't running. You must be mistaken, Jack.
If you weren't running, why did you turn away as soon as you saw me?
How could his eyesight be so good? He had spotted her immediately. But she didn't want to get involved with people from their circle, especially Michael's friends.
It's a bit cold at night. I was just going home to put on something warmer.
She turned to leave, but a hand grabbed her arm, and the strong smell of alcohol filled her nose. She glared back at him, only to see him grinning wildly.
Aren't you cold? Put it on and walk with me.
He held on to her with one hand while taking off his suit jacket with the other. When he threw the jacket over to her, it still carried his body heat and the scent of alcohol.
Isn't this a bit much, Jack?
A bit much? Look, I gave you the only jacket I had. I'm freezing myself. How is that too much?
He was only wearing a deep blue silk shirt, the collar open and fluttering in the night breeze.
The thing is, I don't want to walk with you. I want to go home.
She tried to take off the jacket and return it to him, but he firmly stopped her. He didn't care about her cold rejection or the chilly night air. Jack maintained his gentlemanly demeanor.
Keep it on. I'll take you home.
I think I don't need anyone to take me home. I don't want to get involved with you, Jack. Even if I'm overthinking it.
Overthinking, Emily. You all call me a playboy, right? If I truly liked someone, how could I still be called a playboy?
The curve of his lips seemed to mock her earlier overthinking.
You're not special. I'm this considerate to every woman out late at night, so you don't need to feel uneasy.
In the misty moonlight, she stared at him for a long time. Being a seasoned player in the field of romance, he didn't care about my gaze at all. He even shrugged nonchalantly, as if the hazy moonlight and I within it didn't catch his eye. I sighed in relief and slowly walked towards the front door. He followed me at a leisurely pace, maintaining a certain distance.
As I stood on the steps and half pushed the door open, Jack, who had been silent all the way, suddenly spoke.
The night wind is chilly. Don't wear such thin clothes when you go out. And, a girl alone, even in a law-abiding society, it's not entirely safe.
His gentle tone caught me off guard.
Thanks for the reminder. I rarely go out late at night, so you should save your concern for your girlfriend.
Leaning against the porch column with his arms crossed, he laughed heartily. The motion-activated light turned on, illuminating his smiling face even more clearly.
A playboy like me doesn't have a girlfriend. I'm a lone wolf. Otherwise, why do you think I'd be wandering around at such a special and ambiguous hour? You keep your distance from me because I'm Michael's friend, right?
How could he not understand such an obvious thing? I looked at him from the shadow of the doorway.
You're a smart guy, Jack. Some questions don't need to be asked.
Jack smiled slightly, raised an eyebrow, and walked into the night without another word. I stood at the door for a long time, not even sure what I was looking at. When I finally returned to my bedroom, I realized I was still wearing his suit jacket. I tossed it onto the living room carpet. It's just a piece of clothing, Jack wouldn't care. After all, a playboy like him wouldn't be too attached to women, let alone an insignificant jacket. This thought mocked me harshly 3 nights later. I was curled up in my room, illustrating for a publisher, when I received an unexpected call.
I never would have guessed that the voice on the other end would be Jack's.
Alice, good evening. I was wondering if you still have my clothes. I suddenly missed them.
What do you want, Jack?
I told you, I'm here for my clothes.
Have you been drinking?
Alice. Even if I were drunk, I'd still know who I'm thinking about and what I'm doing. Bring my clothes to the hotel on Central Street.
He was serious. Before I could protest, the line went dead, leaving me bewildered. What was wrong with Jack? Why was he so fixated on a piece of clothing? I got up and hurriedly found the crumpled shirt under the coffee table. I pursed my lips. If I had known he would want it back, I wouldn't have treated it so carelessly. By the time I arrived at the hotel on Central Street with the shirt, it was already 10 p.m. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw Jack leaning against the entrance, smoking. To my surprise, Michael was with him. Seeing me, Michael pretended not to notice and turned away to light a cigarette. I stood there, unsure of what to do. In the cool early autumn night, Jack was lazily standing there in a black shirt, the warm light from the hotel lobby behind him. He smiled as he saw me approach.
I thought I might freeze all night.
He took the bag from my hand and saw the wrinkled shirt inside.
Sorry, I've been busy and forgot to tidy it up.
Really busy, or just making an excuse?
Put on my jacket if you're cold.
Michael's voice suddenly cut in, throwing a jacket at Jack. His impatience was evident.
Is it that cold? Did you really need someone to bring you a shirt?
Jack's smile faded, and I saw a hint of mockery in his eyes.
What? Does it bother you?
He stood up straight, letting the jacket fall.
Are you upset that I'm in contact with Emily? Still have feelings for her?
Michael's face changed at those words, his tone becoming aggressive.
What are you talking about? Are you misunderstanding something?
He looked at me with disdain.
Even if there were lingering feelings, it would be on her part.
Sorry. Mr. Lee, you're overthinking it. I don't like you anymore, so there's no need for you to be so overbearing because of my presence.
In response, Michael slammed the car door and walked away angrily. Jack walked over and stood beside me, watching the car drive away.
Sorry. I didn't know Michael would show up suddenly.
I breathed in the cool night air without responding, Jack's voice continuing in my ear.
I didn't mean to embarrass you.
I turned to look at him, forcing a smile.
You're overthinking it, Jack. It's been so long, I've already moved on. No need to apologize for that.
People were coming and going around us, but Jack's presence was so imposing that no one dared to approach, instead giving us a wide berth. His expression was serious, and after a long pause, he spoke again, his tone as flippant as ever.
Have you ever thought about being with me?
I looked at him in surprise, wondering if I had heard wrong. He seemed displeased with my reaction.
Why are you looking at me like that? Is it so strange?
My smile stiffened.
Are you just having a momentary whim? Looking for a change of pace, Jack?
The night wind tousled his hair as he drew out his words, adding a hint of ambiguous whisper.
What if I've always had deep feelings for you? What if I can't live without you?
The sincerity on Jack's face was something I had never seen before. His unique, pleasant voice in the quiet night seemed almost enchanting, each word carrying a mix of truth and jest. He had beautiful eyes, and when he looked at someone seriously, it was like staring into the deepest lake. His intense gaze made me feel a bit flustered, and I quickly looked away.
Being with your best friend's ex isn't a good idea.
You don't want to?
I'm not good enough for you, Jack. You have plenty of women around you. Why bother with someone like me?
I saw his chest heave heavily as he avoided my eyes, pulling out a cigarette from his pocket. When he had the cigarette back in his mouth, Jack reverted to his previous nonchalant demeanor.
What? Did I scare you? No need for that, Alice. Squinting his eyes as he exhaled the smoke, I like all beautiful things, Alice. You have a very attractive face, enough to catch anyone's eye.
So it's just because of my face?
He lowered his eyes, the smoke obscuring the color in his gaze. Strangely, Alice felt that Jack seemed a bit sad at that moment.
Yes, because of your face. How could I ever truly fall for anyone? Looking up again, smiling, his eyes narrowed. I'm known as a playboy, aren't I? Deep feelings and all that, it's all a joke.
The conversation was abruptly cut off. He had someone bring a car over and drove Alice home. The clothes that had been messed up were thrown back to her in a bag.
Alice, remember to wash and iron these for me.
Alice felt he didn't really need the clothes, he just wanted to trouble her. She got out of the car, took out a bank card from her wallet, and held it between her fingers.
I don't know how to iron, Jack. How about I compensate you?
Through the car window, she saw his eyes curve into a smile. The window rolled down, and Jack looked at her face to face, enunciating each word.
No! Way!
She couldn't be bothered with him and turned to walk towards the door. Before she reached it, Jack's voice came clearly from behind.
Alice, I don't mind your relationship with Michael, so if you change your mind, I'm always here.
Her hand holding the key stiffened, but she pretended not to hear and pushed the door open without looking back. Some people are just not meant for her to get involved with. In the middle of the night, a light rain began to fall outside. Though the rain wasn't heavy, it brought an unexpected chill. At this moment, my phone rang. It was Michael. I lay in my warm bed, listening to his voice on the phone, as cold as ever. He seemed to have had too much to drink, his words slurred and unclear. I couldn't make out most of what he said, but I caught the name Emily. After a faint sound of water, he seemed to sober up a bit.
Emily,
Yes, Mr. Lee?
you've got some nerve. Did it take a lot of effort to get close to Jack? Do you really think Jack would like you?
I adjusted my knitted sweater, trying to suppress the laugh in my throat.
Did you dial the wrong number? Someone like Jack is way out of my league.
There was a long silence on the other end, and I could almost picture Michael's furrowed brow.
What is your relationship with Jack?
Faced with his questioning, this time, I didn't hide the sigh that escaped my chest.
We broke up, remember? You were the one who ended it. Have you forgotten already?
The silence on the other end was deafening.
So I really want to know, what right do you have to question my relationship with Jack? As an ex-boyfriend? Ex-boyfriends don't get to control that.
After a loud crash, I heard Michael's low, gritted warning.
I warned you, don't play games. Trying to get my attention by getting close to Jack is not a clever move.
Michael, don't you think you're overestimating yourself?
I chased after Michael for 2 years, only to be his girlfriend for 4 months. And even then, it was unofficial and unacknowledged. It was only in countless sleepless nights later that I realized any relationship that makes you feel wronged, hesitant, and conflicted is not the right one. No matter how much you like a pair of high heels, if they keep hurting your feet, you'll eventually stop liking them.
I'm perfectly clear-headed. I haven't played any games, nor have I tried to get your attention. I don't want to be entangled with you anymore, so you can rest easy.
With every word I uttered, I could hear Michael's breathing grow heavier on the other end. I didn't know what he was thinking at that moment, but I heard his mocking tone.
Do you know what kind of person Jack is? He's a notorious playboy. Do you really think you're special to him?
I closed my eyes, a complex emotion welling up inside me, bringing a deep sense of helplessness. I didn't understand how things had come to this. I used to believe that love could conquer all, but I lost miserably with Michael. He didn't like me, so I sensibly stepped aside, only to be met with his relentless ridicule now.
So what?
The mocking voice on the other end abruptly stopped.
I really like Jack. I like him a lot.
As Jack's face flashed before my eyes, the words slipped out of my mouth.
I just love playboys. Jack is handsome, rich, and powerful. Why wouldn't I like him? You should be happy. I'm finally not clinging to you like a leech.
The call ended abruptly, the dark phone screen reflecting my mocking smile. The sound of rain outside grew louder, and eventually, that mocking curve stiffened, turning into something unrecognizable even to myself. This night was destined to be a sleepless one. After a night of restless sleep, I was filled with irritation when I heard the doorbell in the morning. The rain had lessened, and when I opened the door, there stood Jack, his shoulders wet from the rain. He seemed impervious to the cold, always wearing thin clothes and running around everywhere. Now, he was standing there in a thin shirt, smiling at me.
I heard someone said they liked me last night. Was it you, Alice?
Did Michael tell you?
Of course! He called me in the middle of the night, telling me not to get any ideas, saying you're not right for me.
He suddenly leaned in, his eyes fixed on me.
Why do you think Michael is acting so strange?
How would I know? You're his good friend. If you don't know, how would a stranger like me?
Don't know?
He enunciated each word slowly, one by one. I turned my head away, avoiding his gaze. We both knew deep down that Michael's odd behavior might be due to his dislike for me, not wanting me to get involved in his circle, or perhaps it was possessiveness, unable to stand seeing someone who once clung to him shift their attention. But with so many possibilities, who could tell which was true and which was false? He stopped talking and stood up straight. The rain was still falling around us. He suddenly took 2 steps forward, and I instinctively stepped back, but he grabbed my arm, holding me firmly in place.
Alice, do you want to go crazy? Come on, let's do it together. I'm here with you. What are you afraid of? I know what's on your mind.
The tight string in my mind snapped. As I looked up, brushing past his nose, the sound of the rain isolated us from everything else. In the pattering rain, I heard my own response.
All right.
Even if it was just for a moment, to forget the entanglements with Michael, to forget the countless cold nights. The continuous hardships had worn away my affection. I could barely remember the passion I once had for Michael.
Alice, you're great. I'm a playboy, so I won't be sad about true love or anything. So it's okay if you use me as a stepping stone.
For a moment, I felt that the man in front of me had a hidden gentleness that no one noticed. People in our circle said that the second son of the Zhou family had suddenly settled down, frequently visiting one place, speculating that Jack might have found the love of his life. When I heard this, Jack was lounging on my sofa, resting his eyes. He was tall, his long legs extending beyond the sofa, looking completely out of place. Yet, he loved it, coming over every afternoon for a nap. I put down my stylus and propped my chin, watching him. Perhaps sensing my gaze, he opened his sleepy eyes and looked at me. The weather was great today, sunlight haloing his hair, giving him a dreamy glow.
Why are you staring at your boyfriend like that? What are you thinking?
I blinked and told him the news I had just heard.
They don't understand. Zhou Xiao has a girlfriend now, how could he still be messing around? Right, Alice?
His smile, mixed with the sunlight, dazzled my eyes. They said Jack changed women like clothes, never keeping anyone around for long. But we had been together for almost 6 months, and he didn't seem tired of me yet. When I impulsively got together with Jack, he often said half-true sweet nothings, making it hard to tell what was real. His serious demeanor sometimes made me think he genuinely liked me. But could someone like Jack truly fall for anyone? It was absurd, laughable even. I chuckled at my own ridiculous thoughts.
What's making you so happy?
I was thinking, what kind of girl will be able to stay with you for a lifetime?
Why couldn't it be you?
I know my place.
Then what are we now?
A mutually beneficial relationship?
Seeing his face darken, I realized I might have said the wrong thing. Jack looked genuinely upset, a side of him I had never seen before. He got up and threw himself onto the single sofa opposite, squinting at me.
I think you always misunderstand the situation. I've kissed you, held you, done things with you that you and Michael never did. And you call this a mutually beneficial relationship?
I thought he was about to lose his temper, but he held back, though he did curse under his breath.
Michael, that jerk, wasn't even officially with you, yet you call him your ex. But with me, I'm not even considered your boyfriend?
I was stunned, a wild thought crossing my mind. Could Jack actually like me? His reaction and words were hard to ignore. Jack's anger didn't subside.
I won't come over tomorrow.
Then.
I thought he was just sulking, but I didn't ask. At the door, Jack paused, his tone softening as if he felt his earlier words were too harsh.
I have something to do tomorrow. Michael is getting engaged, and I need to be there.
For the first time, hearing Michael and engagement together didn't stir any strong emotions in me. It felt like a trivial matter. I smiled lightly at him.
All right, you go ahead. I'll wait for you at home.
The next morning, instead of Jack, it was a heavily intoxicated Michael who burst through my door. The smell of alcohol hit me as soon as he opened the door, and he seemed momentarily stunned to see me.
Michael? Shouldn't you be at your engagement party with Sarah right now? Why are you here?
Alice.
There's no need for us to be so familiar with each other anymore.
His dark eyes stared at me intensely.
Are you really with Jack?
Yes, we've been together for almost 6 months.
Michael's voice sounded almost hysterical, his eyes red with a mix of alcohol and anger.
Are you crazy? With Jack? How could someone like him ever truly love anyone?
What does it matter to you?
He seemed taken aback, his face turning a shade of blue.
I just wanted to ask.
Ask what? If I still have feelings for you? If there's a chance for us to get back together?
I bluntly exposed his thoughts. Maybe I was cold-hearted, maybe I was too tough, or maybe I was just inherently unfeeling, but I no longer had any emotions left for Michael.
It's impossible. I'm not that foolish. You feel uncomfortable and resentful seeing me with Jack, even to the point of lashing out at your good friend. Is this behavior because you still have some feelings for me, or is it just possessiveness? You probably can't even tell the difference.
He tried to defend himself, but no words came out. In the end, he just closed his eyes in defeat.
Go back, Michael. Go where you belong, Do what you need to do, and think carefully about what you really want.
It was 8 in the morning, and the place Michael should be was at his engagement party, popping champagne with his beloved Sarah, not here, reeking of alcohol and arguing with me. His phone rang incessantly from his pocket, the caller on the other end growing more and more impatient. Michael seemed deaf to it all, his face growing more irritable with each ring. Before he could lose control and throw his phone, I took a deep breath and pulled it out of his pocket. Jack's name was on the screen. On the other end, his voice was as lazy as ever.
Where are you, buddy? On such a happy day, why can't I see you? Don't tell me you're off fooling around?
Jack, it's me. He's with me. Come and get him.
After a brief silence, I heard the sound of a car door slamming. Jack's voice was tight with anger.
Is he out of his mind?
Jack arrived in a rush, his car skidding to a stop some distance away. Behind him was Sarah, holding a parasol, looking at me from across the car. Jack's steps were quick, leaving Sarah behind as he stormed up to Michael and dragged him away from my door.
Get back. If you're drunk, go sober up. Stop making a fool of yourself.
Michael wanted to lash out, but he held back when he saw Sarah approaching. Sophia supported him, casting a glance my way.
Michael came
To scold me. He looks down on me, saying I shouldn't drag his good friend into this mess.
Jack gave me a long, hard look.
Take him back and help him sober up.
Sophia's mouth moved as if to say something, but no words came out. As she helped Michael down the steps, a faint thank you drifted back to me. I pretended not to hear it. Sophia couldn't drive in her high heels, so it was Jack who took on the responsibility of driving us back. I stood at the door, watching as the car suddenly stopped, made a turn, and came back around. Jack got out from the driver's seat, expressionless, and grabbed my collar, shoving me into the passenger seat.
What are you doing?
Who knows what kind of trouble might come looking for you? You're still under my care, so I need to keep an eye on you.
The trouble in the back seat fell silent. I thought Jack was joking about keeping an eye on me, but he actually locked me up in his house. He stood by the door, his eyes cold, lips tightly pressed with restrained anger. This was a side of Jack I had never seen before. His dissatisfaction and grievances were laid bare.
You're still my woman, entangling with your ex-boyfriend, is that appropriate?
I felt a bit wronged. I hadn't provoked him, it was Michael who couldn't let go and came looking for me. I wanted to explain myself, but before I could speak, the door was slammed shut and locked. The large villa was eerily quiet, with only Martha, the cook, around. It wasn't until she ran out of the kitchen to scold the short-legged cat for trying to go upstairs that there was a bit of liveliness. I sat on the couch in the living room for a long time, trying to call Jack, but he hung up every time. He was probably still angry. After all, someone like him, even if he was just casually involved with me, couldn't tolerate his woman being entangled with another man, even though I was completely innocent in this matter. I rested my chin on my hand, thinking about how to explain things to Jack when he returned. Suddenly, I saw the short-legged cat, which was forbidden from going upstairs, darting up. I tilted my head, seeing that Martha wasn't around, and decided to go upstairs to fetch the cat myself. There weren't many rooms on the second floor, most of them tightly shut, except for one at the end of the hall, which was slightly ajar. I followed the sound of the cat's meows and pushed the door open, only to be stunned by what I saw. The room was like an art gallery, with paintings carefully hung on the walls. As I looked at each one, I noticed that my name was written in the bottom right corner of every painting. My family background wasn't great, and my mother didn't care for me. In college, she even cut off my living expenses. To continue my studies, I not only worked part-time but also tried to sell my paintings through intermediaries. Someone always bought them at a high price, and I thought I was just lucky. I never realized there was more to it. All the past events started to make sense. Jack's cautious approach after my breakup with Michael, his anger when Michael and I were entangled. Everything had an explanation now. Jack wasn't a playboy, he was deeply affectionate. Martha stood at the door, hesitant to speak.
What's wrong?
Sir doesn't allow anyone in this room. He treasures the things inside.
Why? I pointed towards the room. Is he secretly in love with someone?
Martha's face turned pale, as if she had made a mistake, which amused me. She probably feared saying something wrong again and avoided me for the rest of the afternoon. Bored, I took a nap on the sofa. When I opened my eyes again, it was already dark. The living room lights were off, and the moon hung high outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a cold light that illuminated the room. Jack had returned at some point and was facing away from me, taking off his clothes. His jacket lay carelessly on the carpet.
Did I wake you?
Seeing that I was awake, he paused.
No, I slept enough.
It was clear that Jack was not in a good mood. He exuded a coldness that kept people at a distance.
Let's go, I'll take you back.
I didn't move, leaning forward slightly.
Even a condemned person should have the right to defend themselves, right?
A cold laugh echoed in the empty room.
Defend? Rights? What's there to say? Jack has seen many beauties, you're just another one of them. Do you think I'm angry because I like you? Isn't that a bit too fanciful? Anything with my label should behave. No one else should touch it.
His words were truly harsh. I reached out to tug at his sleeve, and he was taken aback by my action.
Can you sit down first? Let me explain properly.
Jack stared at me coldly in the darkness for a long time, struggling in the moonlight before finally smiling with a hint of menace.
All right. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
He walked over slowly and sat on the opposite sofa, turning on the nearby lamp. The light reflected in his eyes, making him look like a wolf on the prowl. I took a deep breath.
First, I admit I once liked Michael, but that's in the past. After we broke up, I never contacted him. His appearance at my house today was completely unexpected.
Jack's expression remained unchanged, cold as ever.
You probably guessed a bit. His unusual behavior might indicate some regret and lingering feelings, but it doesn't matter anymore. I no longer have feelings for him. Bearing your name, I wouldn't do anything to betray you. I still have that basic decency. Don't think so poorly of me.
Jack's face remained impassive, making it hard to guess his thoughts. I shifted to a more comfortable position and casually asked.
And? I heard you have a crush on a girl?
Jack's gaze turned mocking.
Yeah, so what? Who wasn't a romantic at some point?
He leaned closer.
What? Are you going to make room for my crush?
His proximity and warm breath on my face made my heart race. I blinked and nonchalantly asked.
But the things in the room on the second floor, they seem to be mine?
The usually carefree playboy visibly shifted from calm to flustered. In the soft light, I could even catch a hint of a blush on his face. I had never seen Jack like this before, it was truly surprising. Do you really like that girl so much? I counted, almost all the paintings she sold during college ended up with you.
You knew?
Yes. I like you so much now. Are you still mad at me because of Michael? Besides, why be mad at me? It's not something I could control. The cold night wind blew in, and his eyes, deep with hidden emotions, looked even more profound in the light, dispelling his usual carefree demeanor.
I thought your heart would never move on from Michael, that you were with me just to heal your wounds.
His downcast eyes made him look especially sincere.
I never thought you would actually like me, nor did I dare to let you know my feelings.
This usually nonchalant Jack had wrapped himself in a carefree shell, carefully hiding his true feelings. I walked over and wrapped my arms around his waist. It's okay, I know now. I'm happy. I didn't use you to heal my wounds, I just fell for you. It has nothing to do with Michael. The wind outside rustled the branches, and Jack's grip around my waist tightened, making it hard for me to breathe. I nestled in his arms and asked, "Why did you buy my paintings?"
Because I liked you. From the first moment I saw you, I couldn't help but like you. But you didn't know me, and I was too scared to approach you. When I heard you were selling your paintings, I knew you needed money. I have plenty of money, so of course, I wanted to help you in any way I could.
So, he had feelings for me from the very beginning. Do you know why I liked Michael so much, why I clung to him? Jack raised an eyebrow, waiting for my answer. Because once, I saw him personally pick up a painting from the person who commissioned it. I always thought he was secretly helping me. As soon as I finished speaking, Jack's face twisted as if he had swallowed poison. He gritted his teeth, his face contorted with anger.
I only asked him to pick it up once.
But it was that one time that caused Jack and me to miss each other for so many years. The only consolation was that he never gave up on me. I slipped out of his arms and looked up at him. By the way, what happened to Michael in the end? The series of events had left him with no good feelings at the mention of Michael's name, and he spoke with irritation.
The engagement party was a disaster. He got so drunk he couldn't even stand, let alone get engaged. His parents were embarrassed and turned it into a gathering of close friends.
He let out a derisive laugh.
Isn't that ridiculous?
I remembered the moment when Sarah stood outside the car, looking at me. It must have been a bitter experience for her. But their love and hate had nothing to do with me anymore. From now on, Michael was Michael and I was me. And Jack, he was mine.